Did Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh reveal the Baltimore Ravens 2024 draft plans in their pre-draft press conference? We talk about that and so much more coming up next year on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, coming to you from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thank you so much for being here today and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. Free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also in audio form, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you can follow along over there as well. It's the same show, both audio and video form. So if you want to listen one day, watch another, we have it covered. We do live shows, or of course, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. That is a constant here on Locked On Ravens. But also we do live shows after every piece of Ravens big news, after Ravens games as well. So really appreciate everybody who's in every day or tuning in every single day here. If it's your first time into the channel of the show, welcome in. If you're somewhere in the middle, welcome back. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's $150 when I lose. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. We have a lot to talk about today as the Ravens held their pre-draft press conference, their annual pre-draft press conference yesterday. I was considering going live, but I was honestly, there wasn't necessarily a huge story that I wanted to take and run for a live show, where I figured I could get it all done and talk about the big parts in today's episode instead of going live yesterday. I was really close to doing it. I was really close to going live, but I decided just to save everything for this show. So I wasn't trying to stretch anything out too thin, essentially. I still wanted to have enough to talk about on today's show. We did get some tidbits from both DeCosta and Harbaugh just about Baltimore's plans, what they want to do, what they hope to do. But a lot of people do call this the Liars Luncheon, and it's interesting. We didn't really get a ton of name drops in this. Usually we do, but we didn't really get that this year. So we're going to be talking about what DeCosta and Harbaugh both had to say, what they revealed, what they didn't reveal, and then we'll get into just their general comments and just what they had to say, not only about the draft, but also about some of the guys already on their roster and some other things as well. So I actually had some technical difficulties trying to start this show up. I'm sure I'll have more as it goes on. So not looking forward to that. Hopefully we can get through this in one smooth run, but if not, I'll figure it out, because technology, for people who've been with me for a while, me and technology do not get along very well. But let's talk about these comments now, starting off with some of these things that DeCosta and Harbaugh had to say. Now, Eric DeCosta said the team spent all day yesterday, and that means from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., reviewing the offensive linemen in this draft class. Now, we know Baltimore has a need on their offensive line. It's not a secret. It's not a secret. Baltimore is going to take at least one offensive lineman in this class. I would anticipate them taking one pretty early on in this class, just because of how deep it is. And it's just a good year to need an offensive lineman. Baltimore is going to kind of, I don't want to say they're going to stumble into a guy, but there's a possibility that one of these top offensive line guys falls to 30 potentially, or maybe falls near 30 and Baltimore makes a move. But this is going to be a very offensive line centric draft for Baltimore. You can just kind of tell with the way their roster is right now. It's not that they don't have other needs. We'll talk about edge, we'll talk about corner, wide receiver, but offensive line, to me and a lot of other people, is by far and away the number one need that this team has. Now, DeCosta also said by the end of the week, the Ravens draft board will likely be set, and then some alterations could actually be made on draft week. So Baltimore's going to get, and they already have a pretty good idea of which guys they have ranked ahead of others, which guy they have on their board, which guys they have off. So it's not that Baltimore isn't going to make their adjustments. DeCosta said as such, where, hey, maybe we'll tweak this here and tweak this there as draft week actually comes about. But for now, they're just getting everything in order, getting prepared. It's pretty straightforward stuff, honestly. It's not anything too revolutionary. But Then we kind of got a little bit about the positions that Baltimore's looking to add. And the one that caught my ear, the one that I was listening and DeCosta made a declaration about was the cornerback class. And in the corner class, DeCosta said, quote, "We would love to add a talented corner at some point in this draft." Now, we haven't necessarily talked a ton about corner on this show just because we've been spending a lot of time, and not that I haven't identified it as a need, because personally I have, but we haven't necessarily talked a ton about, well, what happens if they take a guy in the first round? The Ravens aren't going to be in like Terrion Arnold territory. Kenyon Mitchell, they're not going to be there as well. Maybe a guy falls like a Mitchell, but I wouldn't count on it. It's really Kool-Aid McKinstry is the guy that a lot of people have their eye on for the Ravens right now. It's not that I didn't expect the Ravens to not take a corner. Like, it's not like DeCosta's comments were like, "Oh, they're taking a corner. What? This is crazy." It was never like that. But it did feel, not like a declaration, but I think a lot of people have been discounting a little bit of how big of a need corner is. And I'm not saying it's the biggest need on the team, but the sweet spot for the corner class to me, and this is something I have talked about on this show, second to fourth round is where I think the Ravens can get a lot of quality cornerbacks. And so you can take an offensive lineman in the first round, you can take an edge guy, you can take a wide receiver, and still feel pretty confident. Hey, maybe you go and take Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon, who's one of my guys in this class. Renardo Green out of Florida State. There are options there, and I do expect, again, with Baltimore, their nickel position right now is pretty solid. Like, not a ton of complaints there, but it's on the outside where Brandon Stevens is not signed to an extension yet. Marlon Humphrey's contract is going to be more and more of a conversation point. So you're kind of wondering, are they looking for that? And the Ravens love running three-corner rotations anyway. I mean, we saw it last year with Humphrey and Stevens and Ronald Darby. We saw it with Humphrey and Marcus Peters and Jimmy Smith and Marlon Humphrey, Jimmy Smith, and Brandon Carr. Like, we've seen them like to run three outside corner rotations or have three quality outside corners on their roster. And that's where I think Baltimore can add here. Plus, Eric DeCosta also mentioned how they're always injured at corner, which is not a lie. I will never forget 2014 when they had to trot out and sign Rashawn Melvin off the street. A season that 2014, very side tangent. It's one of those years that I always look back on. They would have won the Super Bowl if they beat the Patriots in the divisional that year, blew 2 14-point leads. But I don't want to get too off track with that. Keep getting into a little bit of what the comments were from DeCosta, and also said a little bit about the running back situation, saying that they'd like to add a running back as well, probably in the later stages of the draft, honestly, is what I'm assuming there. I would be shocked if Baltimore added a guy in the first 2 days of this draft. I mean, I don't even think there's a guy worth adding in the first or second round, even if you are a running back needy team this year. But for Baltimore, fourth round on has kind of been what my philosophy has been regarding running back this offseason. You signed Derrick Henry to an $8 million per year deal. Wouldn't shock me if Baltimore took a running back later on day 3, where they have 9 picks right now. You're waiting for Keaton Mitchell to get back healthy. You take a running back in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, and you have that guy be your number 3 until Keaton comes back. And it's honestly easier to slot that day 3 pick into the 4th running back role once Keaton comes back, as opposed to signing a JK or a Dalvin Cook or one of those guys as well. Now, DeCosta also talked about guys falling potentially, saying, quote, "You hope and pray that one of those top 20 guys might be there at 30. It's almost like what Baltimore, I mean, I guess they were kind of hoping and praying Kyle Hamilton fell to him at 14 a little bit. Now, I wouldn't run that same risk again. Like, the Ravens ran a huge risk in that draft by not trading up for Kyle Hamilton. There was no way he should have fallen to 14. Once they hit like 10, I was like, all right, trade up. I'm like, this is no way this happens. And it did. That doesn't happen a lot. So if there's a top 20 guy that falls even remotely close to 30, you're talking like 25, 26, the Ravens don't want to move heaven and earth to trade up. I just feel like that's not what they want to do, especially at 30 with that, when that pick in general doesn't have as much trade up value. But still, the Ravens could look to make a couple spots up there. And look, crazy things have happened. Like, I wouldn't predict Baltimore trades up, but it's not totally out of the realm of possibility. And I could potentially see them doing it if a guy they really, really like falls into that 25 to 28 range, even just to move up a couple of spots and maybe grab that guy. Coming up, though, in the second part of the show, we'll keep talking about what Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh had to say, some of those draft plans, if they revealed any of those, and a lot more. Stay tuned, plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. I'm hoping the Denver Nuggets get a lot of automatic wins this playoffs. I'm a big Denver Nuggets guy. They're pining for that 1 seed right now with the Minnesota Timberwolves, Oklahoma City Thunder. So hopefully they get it, but we're going to see. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher here with you on this midweek edition episode. Really appreciate everybody for being here and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. Let's keep diving into what Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh had to say during their pre-draft press conference. Now, DeCosta talked about the wide receivers, and we've talked about this a lot on the show. Actually, specifically, he was asked about the Ravens investing so much draft capital into wide receiver, particularly first-round draft capital into wide receiver. And DeCosta said, quote, "If there's a player that's there that we think is too good to pass up on, we're going to take him." This is the mindset. Like, I understand that they've invested a lot. Marquise Brown, first-round pick in 2019. Rashad Bateman, first-round pick in 2021. Zay Flowers, first-round pick in 2023. Well, the reality is they don't have all three of those guys on the roster. Brown has been gone now for a couple of years after he requested a trade out of Baltimore. We don't really know fully about Bateman right now. I mean, I'm still a Bateman believer, but he's going to have to prove it. Like, it's not a sure thing with him. And obviously Zay, he's entering his second season, phenomenal rookie year, and I expect him to continue stacking on that. But if they love an A.D. Mitchell, if they love a Keon Coleman, if they love, I mean, I'm not advocating for a guy like Xavier Worthy. He's not one of my personal favorites in this class, but if they like Xavier Worthy, right, they're going to take him. Like, they're going to. And look, we've talked a lot on this show about what particular type of wide receiver the Ravens should be looking for. I'm of the personal belief it should be more of a bigger bodied type, contested pass type guy, go up there, catch the ball with his big frame. Like, that's the type of player. But if Baltimore's really sold on a guy, they're not going to look, because wide receiver is still a need. We talk about all that investment. We're still sitting here today on April 10th talking about how wide receiver is still a need for them. So it's not like, oh, well, they've invested all that draft capital, now they have to stop because it's not every other year because they've done it so much. I mean, again, you have two of the three guys that we talked about still on the roster. One of the guys we don't know about yet. And obviously for Zay, you got to continue to stack together those years. So I do think it is possible Baltimore takes a wide receiver if a guy gets there. I mean, a guy like an A.D. Mitchell probably is not going to fall at this point, but if he does, that's a guy I'd probably take at 30. Keon Coleman, there are some mixed reviews. I know some people are very on the Keon Coleman train, other people not so much. I like Keon Coleman. I think Keon Coleman is a good prospect. So I'm not mad if the Ravens take a wide receiver. You can argue it's their second biggest need. Obviously, offensive line taking the cake there at number one. So I agree with DeCosta. I'm not letting past draft capital dictate if a talented player is there, because you could be passing up on a guy that fits your offense perfectly, a guy that has skill sets you need, just because you drafted a couple of guys in the past. I mean, that's not personally what I'm doing there. And DeCosta also talked about Trenton Simpson a little bit, saying that he thinks Trenton Simpson grew as much as anybody on the team during his rookie season. And to me, I think that the thing, and we've talked about the 2020 draft class and just how weird of a year that was for the rookies. And Patrick Queen obviously was Baltimore's first round pick that year. It was virtual meetings, virtual workouts. Like, the rookie class did not have a full offseason to get acclimated. And I think that did, I don't want to say stunt growth or stunt development, but took guys like Patrick Queen, Justin Madubuike, a lot of that class, a lot of time to kind of find their bearings and find their way. Honestly, the only guy that it kind of clicked for immediately was J.K. Dobbins, and that was more of a reverse situation where he balled out his rookie season, and then obviously the injuries took their toll. But for Trenton Simpson, he had all that. All these guys after that have had all that. So for Simpson, we saw the flashes during the Pittsburgh game in Week 18 last year. I think he has a lot of potential. I don't think that Eric DeCosta's lying there. Like, I think the Ravens probably saw considerable growth from him, and everybody's going to get, like, everybody on the defense already gets the Roquan boost. Like, I'm not saying there aren't going to be any struggles or adjustments for Trent Simpson being in that full-time role, because I don't really expect Baltimore to bring anybody in to fully challenge him. But everybody's going to get that Roquan boost, Trenton Simpson included. But now it's a matter of, can he fill up Patrick Queen's shoes fully? And I said this, I was on Exit 52, the Jumbo set with Jake Luke, who we've had on this show before. I really enjoyed conversations with him, and it was a great episode we did. And we kind of talked about this a little bit. And I had said I wouldn't be shocked if there's a Trenton Simpson, Malik Harrison, almost like rotation at linebacker for the first month, 2 months of the season. And then maybe Trent Simpson takes full hold of that linebacker spot, because I think they like it's weird to call Malik Harrison a veteran at this point. And it's weird actually that Malik Harrison outlasted Patrick Queen, because Queen and Harrison were both taken in the same draft class. Queen was a first rounder. Harrison was a third rounder at linebacker. So kind of crazy to think that Harrison outlasted Queen on this roster. But I do think that they like the experience that Harrison has. They brought back Chris Board. So at the end of the year, I mean, my prediction is Trent Simpson's balling out. But we have seen it before where Baltimore, you can easily pencil in a young guy to a full-time role. Then Baltimore likes to rotate in a veteran early in the season. So would not shock me there whatsoever. Eric DeCosta also talked a lot about, and we can kind of dive more into the running back thing. We did a little bit in the first part of the show, but he did say there is a pretty strong chance the team drafts a running back. So there's not a first-round running back in this year's draft, which is true, but they like a lot of the running backs that go off the board between the 3rd and the 5th rounds. Now, that to me sounds like a Blake Corum answer. Like, I'm not guaranteeing the Ravens draft Blake Corum. I'm not saying that that's their guy and there's no way, but like, that just feels like in the Michigan connection has kind of gone away a little bit with Jim Harbaugh now being in Los Angeles. So I think a lot of people are they're pairing together a lot of those Michigan players that you would say, oh, okay, well, Jim Harbaugh's in Michigan, so of course they go into the Ravens. Now it's, well, Jim Harbaugh is now in LA, and a lot of those guys might go there. So Corum, it feels like, is penciled into LA, but I could see him potentially coming to Baltimore. Now, I think it's a little harder to pencil him into the 4th running back spot once Keaton comes back, but we do know Derrick Henry's not necessarily a long-term solution, and rookie contract running backs can be really valuable. I mean, that's what a lot of these Super Bowl teams has had. I mean, Isaiah Pacheco was a 7th-round pick 2 years ago. His contract has been, $700,000 annually these past 2 years in Kansas City, back-to-back Super Bowl champions. So there's studies and everything, and I still think paying running backs is okay, but still, Henry's not necessarily a long-term solution. I do think Baltimore takes a running back this year. Eric DeCosta did make that pretty clear. Now, DeCosta also talked a bit about just the actual place of the team, and we'll kind of round the second segment out with this and move into the third segment with it as well, because there are a couple of comments on this. But just where the team is right now, DeCosta said we're in the same place as we were last year at this time. We have a lot of time to make moves. We're still building. And also talked about how the destination is September, not May. And you can reference a lot of moves Eric DeCosta made after the draft. And the one that really didn't work out was Rock Ya-Sin, but that was one where it felt like that was happening all along. There was a connection there. And as long as the comp pick thing didn't get impacted, then yeah, right? Like, that's exactly what was going on. But in my opinion, we're going to see a lot of that this year too. I mean, we're going to see a lot of it where the comp pick formula, I can't remember the exact day the deadline is, but it's coming up. Once that ends, I mean, Baltimore's getting 4 comp picks regardless. I mean, they just lost so many guys. There's no way they don't. But we've seen, especially last year, where Ronald Darby comes in late. Obviously, we talked about Ya-Sin, but Jadeveon Clowney, Kyle Van Noy. I know Odell Beckham Jr. came in right before the draft, but it's that timeline where the Ravens are never a team that's going to be super flashy early on with their moves. I mean, some years they will make 1 or 2 big splashes in the, first or second day of free agency. Well, not really first, more like second or third. But Derrick Henry was their one big move this year so far. I still expect them to kind of scavenge around the free agent market, try to find those veteran bargain deals. And we had a lot of conversations, a lot of questions about, oh, well, Kyle Van Noy, Jadeveon Clowney, what do those guys have left in the tank? We're probably going to have the same conversation about a lot of guys Baltimore decides to bring in this year. right around that time, maybe even during the year, like Van Noy was. I mean, he was 3 weeks into the season. So Baltimore, they have a lot of time still. We're just over a month into free agency. Again, Baltimore's roster has a lot of holes that need to be filled. The Ravens have 9 picks right now. We're going to see if they utilize them all, if they're going to trade up, trade back, a lot more. There's still a lot more work to be done on this Ravens team. Coming up, though, we're going to be talking about the last of John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta's pre-draft press conference answers. If there's anything to look out in what they had to say, so be sure to stay tuned. Lots to get to on Locked On Ravens. We're back, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher still here talking with you. As always, really appreciate everybody for tuning in today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day. Be sure to subscribe, follow along, both video form and audio form. Hit that like button, the whole 9 yards. They really appreciate everybody for all the support that's been shown to me. I mean, we're building up so many great communities here, video form, audio form, social media, subtext, really great stuff. And I can't wait to keep going. Draft coming up in a couple weeks. We're almost 2 weeks away, which is unbelievable to think about. So I have a lot of bonus content out for the draft. Now, we talked a lot about, where the Ravens are going. It's September. The destination is not May. But it's funny because, well, maybe not funny. It's just interesting about how there are so many different ways that not only the NFL has changed, but college football and with the NIL stuff. And Eric DeCosta said that the team this year probably has less draftable players on their board, more so due to the fewer underclassmen available, where we're seeing now a lot of players stay, particularly when you're talking about the NIL stuff and guys trying to stay in college for an extra year, make that money, get that NIL deal stuff. Like, I don't blame anybody for doing that, but it's almost set off like a chain reaction of, players, college football players will probably stay in school a little longer if there is that opportunity to make that money, right? To generate revenue for themselves, their families, which again, I do not blame anybody for doing, but I think we will start to see more underclassmen stay in college for their senior seasons and, redshirt, whatnot. But it's going to be interesting because the Ravens could maybe look to add extra draft picks in next year's class if they feel more strongly about that one. But they're still going to have a pretty hefty class this year just because, again, they have so many holes. They've lost so many guys in the draft, and rookie contracts is going to be ever so important in how the Ravens have to build their roster in a Lamar Jackson massive contract era, especially. It's not only Lamar and his contract, but all these other big contracts are going to be coming down the pipeline there as well. Now, DeCosta also said that whenever, you're talking about before the draft, there are always moves you can make. But he said that you never know about an addition before the draft now. But he did note that Kyle Van Noy was one of the last quote-unquote items on his pre-draft checklist, saying, I don't know that we'll really do a lot over the next couple of weeks beyond draft preparation, which, doesn't shock me totally. Again, we do call this the liar's luncheon, so maybe Eric DeCosta has another little move up his sleeve before the draft starts. But yeah, it would not totally shock me if the Ravens just kind of go into the draft, do that, and then based off of how the board falls for them, go out there and start to make a lot more free agent additions, because even they don't know how the board is going to fall, right? Things happen. We can come on this show, speculate about if they're going to take an offensive lineman, take a corner, take an edge guy, take a wide receiver in the first round, trade up, trade back, stay put. But we don't know. They don't know. Nobody knows how this board is going to fall until it's literally right in front of you, and we're at pick 30 in a couple weeks. So we don't know if, the Ravens go and they spend big money on a wide receiver, they spend big money on an edge guy or an offensive lineman, and then their dream guy falls to them. Well, you've already spent the money, and then you also have the guy you take. So sometimes teams just like to see how the draft plays out so that they can have a better idea of what needs they have exiting the draft. And, you're about a month and a half at that point into free agency. So you have a better idea of what the actual pool looks like that's remaining right there. Now, John Harbaugh he was confident in his team. He was asked about him, and he said, quote, "We're going to have a heck of a team this year. You wait, you watch." That's the confidence as a head coach you have to have in your team, right? I'm not trying to like, oh, that's so nerdy. Like, oh, that's so cheesy, so cliche. Like, Harbaugh believes in this team. Like, he is somebody that he wins the players over with his belief. He wins the players over with the way that he has changed. And I'm sure that people will be pulling that quote and pulling that clip, whether the Ravens do good or bad this year. But you want your head coach to have that mindset. Like, I know that there are a lot of people that are over John Harbaugh. They think he's not the right coach for this team. But he has a way with the players. The players want to play for him. And obviously, there are going to be a lot of conversations we have here on Locked On Ravens throughout the rest of this offseason about how big of a year this is for John Harbaugh. Personally, I think it is a make or break year for John Harbaugh. But he's confident in his guys. And I think the team is actually, just based off of what both DeCosta and Harbaugh had to say, my biggest takeaway from this is they're just really confident in their young guys. Like, they love their guys. I mean, they had avenues and they had opportunities to be super aggressive. And they've had it over the course of their franchise history to go out there, be aggressive, sign all these, veterans to deals and kind of make it so that you have a bunch of veteran competition. But I think they love guys like Ben Cleveland. They love guys like Odafe Owe and David Ajabo or Darius Washington slotting into a role. Obviously, Trenton Simpson coming in. I think they're expecting big things from Travis Jones and Broderick Washington. Tight end wise, Charlie Kohler is someone that I think they expect big things from. I mean, they love their guys. So while I'm not saying they aren't going to sign any other veterans, like, they are still going to add vets, it just feels like they want to give their players the right opportunity. Where if you keep bringing in veteran after veteran after veteran to essentially leapfrog a lot of these late round guys, you're never going to know what you have. And I think that's a mindset, and that's something that every team kind of goes through. But it's also something that you have to balance out, because especially in Baltimore's position, you can love your young guys and you can want those guys to succeed. But there is a balance about being in your quarterback's prime, about this being your window where you do need vets. I mean, you do. So it's that balance that Baltimore has to, I guess, balance as they figure out the rest of their roster. But that doesn't mean that Baltimore is not going to have a big draft class. It does not mean that the Ravens are going to just go into the year and, only prioritize veterans. I think Baltimore did a good job last year for the most part. I mean, it was definitely more veteran heavy when you kind of look back at the moves they made. I expect this year to be more draft pick heavy just because of how things played out for them this year. They only have 4 remaining free agents: J.K. Dobbins, Dalvin Cook, Rock Ya-Sin, and Darryl Worley. So I think we're kind of past the re-sign phase. I mean, Van Noy, you talk about checklist. Eric DeCosta had, Van Noy is like the last thing on his checklist. That was kind of my last thing in the re-signing checklist, where sure, you could go and re-sign a Worley, but I don't really think J.K. Dobbins is coming back. I don't really think Dalvin Cook's coming back. Don't really think Rock Ya-Sin is coming back. This is now about adding new faces, about filling those holes with new faces, and we're going to see how it plays out for them. But the biggest thing I took away is, well, again, not only the fact that they're going to probably draft a couple positions here like corner and running back, and they're going to draft offensive linemen too, but Baltimore does like their guys. They like their young guys, and we're going to see a lot of them get a shot here over the course of the next couple of months as we head into the 2024 season. That's all I have for you today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Actually, no technical difficulties. I was very shocked. I had no technical difficulties this time around, so really pleased about that. But thank you so much for tuning into the show today. Be sure to like the video, subscribe on YouTube. Also, subscribe and follow along in audio form as well, wherever you get your podcast. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content. Stay tuned for that. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.